Thanks so much, everyone, for being here. I know it's not been not an ideal quarter for many reasons in terms of doing everything by Zoom, and this is, I guess, no exception. I wish we were able to join together in person, but we're doing our best to kind of replicate the experience and have this session with the faculty of the Religious Liberty Clinic as well as some students to really give you all an opportunity to hear about the work that we do, ask questions of current students and those maybe that you already know, and do so in a sort of unfiltered way. So part of the process is going to be I'm Jim Sani. I direct the Religious Liberty Clinic. We have Zeba Huck with us, who is the clinical supervising attorney, and Erica Farmer, who is our trusted legal assistant. I'm gonna share a few comments at the beginning that we will record for those who were unable to join us. And then after those introductory comments, we will leave the room. And our students, Nicole Collins, who is with us last spring, right? As well as Christy Korn. You were also with us. I guess all three of you were there last spring, right? Christy Korn and Rachel Beta will answer your questions, as well as Heather Hedges, who's with us now in the clinic. So they have a broad array of experiences and insights, and are ready to answer your questions on anything clinic related. So once we leave, they'll go ahead and share their experiences and field your questions. So just to give you a little bit of background. Oh, and by the way, too, after this call, please feel free to reach out to me or to Zeba or to any of the students by email, phone, what have you. If you have trouble reaching any of us, certainly, we will connect you to the students that you want to talk to or what have you. So, all right, is that me?
No, I think that's me.
So you can hear that. That's why I asked the students yesterday. I'm like, can you hear that when I'm getting calls? I said, yes, we can. So anyway, well, thanks everyone. I'm going to give you a little overview of the clinic, some background to give you a sense of who we are and what we've been doing the last 8 years. We were launched in 2012, and so we've been doing this for now 8 years. And I don't know if you've seen that other law schools are trying to imitate us, which is, I think, a nice, flattering thing. I think Harvard even cited us in its press release on, we want to do just what Stanford's doing. So we'll see. But we are the only full-time clinic, of course, of its kind in the country. And our goal is to train lawyers in, but most importantly, through the field of religious liberty. And I think part of our success has been due to the combination of substance and practice, but so much of it has to do with the creativity, energy, and diversity of our students, which is why I think it's a great opportunity to talk to the students that are with us today. First and foremost, we're an educational experience. On that note, we think that no matter one's personal views on religious liberty and its limits, that we think our clinic offers to participating students of any perspective a really powerful opportunity to learn and practice technical skills as well as human and professional lawyering skills that'll transfer to your future career no matter what you choose to practice in. We kind of think that the kind of work that we do and the kind of situations our clients find themselves in easily translate to other forms of practice, particularly litigation. We don't expect that, we expect maybe a fraction of our students will actually practice this law, but that's not the goal. The goal is to prepare you for law practice, regardless of what you choose to do. So the skills that you'll develop in clinic, we can't promise that, you'll fit all these boxes, but as in the past, we do interviewing and counseling, complaint drafting, motion practice, negotiation, mediation, brief writing, oral advocacy. So those technical skills of a lawyer, as well as deeply human aspects of law practice, case theory, storytelling, cross-cultural lawyering, and just solving our problems for our clients, because that's what we are. We are a client-centered clinic. So on our cases, I encourage you to visit our website, and I'll let the students share their experiences. But just to give you a brief overview, we represent clients of all faiths and in nearly every litigation forum. Our students have stood before PAC City Council hearings on behalf of Christian Homeless Ministries. They've guided Sikhs, Muslims, Jehovah's Witnesses through the EOC process. We've sued prisons for Jewish and Native American clients. Our students have engaged in all aspects of trial court discovery and motions practice for Seventh-day Adventists. We've won unanimous victories at the Ninth Circuit. We also regularly submit amicus briefs to the United States Supreme Court, and we'll be filing a promising cert petition this summer in another case there. So with all this in mind, we think our project can make a difference in terms of your preparation as lawyers. We also, though, I think, on the religious liberty side, we think we can make a difference in the wider world, and not just for the benefit in our clients' lives, but also the wider conversation about religious liberty and its limits. We think at the clinic that our human first, problem solving, bridge building, inclusive approach offers a much needed witness to the abiding value of religious liberty, where it is often at most risk, which is, for our clients, marginalized, misunderstood, and vulnerable people and communities in their efforts to live, work, and serve in difficult situations. And I think that witness, yes, religious liberty gets all the buzz and headline cases, and those are important issues. But we think not only for pedagogical reasons, but also for the broader witness of religious liberty is something for everyone, believer, non-believer alike, and to really focus on situations that involve real human suffering and the challenges that our clients face. We find that we can sort of offer a third way of talking about these issues rather than sort of being at loggerheads. So looking to next year, we're fortunately running in winter and spring, so we shouldn't have the challenge of the online quarter. I would say, and Heather can maybe speak to this when we turn it over to the students, but that if you were to accept online as a given, I think we've had a really good experience. It's far exceeded my expectations, so I wouldn't really be concerned about that. And we're all in this together, of course. But either way, we have an exciting docket planned. We have another rich blend. We're going to have agency cases. We're going to have trial level cases. We'll have appellate opportunities. And again, and with a variety of clients of all faiths and perspectives. Every quarter is different, but I think that the experiences that the students will share today, you will see much of that in your experience. So we hope you'll join us. We're going to turn it over to the students now to answer your questions. And but before we do, if folks have questions for Zeba or for me before we go, obviously, again, as I said, feel free to reach out. But does anyone have any questions for us?
If I could ask a question, maybe.
Yeah, please.
So we heard a little bit kind of in broad strokes about what the application process looks like in kind of the unified session, but could you talk a little bit more about maybe what you're looking for in the applications themselves?
Sure. I mean, I think obviously I think first and foremost, we're looking for folks who are interested in what we do and interested in being there for our clients and learning the practical and professional skills that we offer. And as I said before, there's no prerequisite that you have to have some deep passion for religious liberty. We think, folks that come to our clinic that just say, hey, I've heard what you guys do. It sounds pretty cool. I want to be a part of it. Great. So I know that's sort of a vague answer, but I think really, someone who's interested in learning and is flexible and has some understanding of who we are and what we're about, I think more than carries the day. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thanks everyone. Really appreciate you joining us. And as I say, please drop us a line. You have any follow-up questions, happy to answer them. And hope to see you all next year. And for those friends of yours who weren't able to make it, I hope you'll share your experience with them as well. So, okay. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Christy, and she will lead the student part of the session. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Take care.
Hi all, anybody who's tuning in to watch this video. So we are basically a group of RLC students. I think we might have been introduced in the other video as well, and we'll go down the line and introduce ourselves right before we speak. But basically we just want to explain that we are creating this video because our comments as part of the main panel got cut off. So yeah, and Professor Sani and Zeba had really given us a lot of the floor to discuss our experiences. So we just wanted to make sure that everybody who wanted to access that before the application had the ability to do so too. Like the other clinics, we're not trying to get into specific questions. Those were still unrecorded and really just trying to like recapitulate what we had said about our broad experiences. So with that said, I think we're going to begin. And basically what we each just talked about and what we're going to talk about again quickly right now is first, like basically why we applied to the RLC, and yeah, and what our most meaningful cases were, like what our experience then ended up looking like. So would anyone like to go first?
You go for it, Christy.
All right. Hi, Christy Horn. Anyone obviously can also feel free to email us if they have any follow-up questions as well. I think we should be pretty easily found through Outlook. But yeah, so I applied. I'm a 3L now. I did the RLC my 2L spring, so a year ago now, and then also did advanced clinic in the winter of this year. So applying for me, I guess, was 2 years ago at this point, and I applied. My decision to apply to the RLC was actually an interesting one for me, one I thought a lot about. I had absolutely no previous I had some interest, but hadn't really explored that interest at all in like First Amendment or religious issues, and nothing in my background really like called that out. Definitely hadn't taken Professor McConnell's First Amendment class. Actually, my long-term career goals are, I'm probably going to go into IP litigation. So yeah, not particularly related to religious liberty issues at all. But what I did was I really kind of took the advice of all the clinic people that they give in their lectures to really kind of view this more as like building tools and think about what skills you want to work on, and then kind of pick your clinic choice around that more than substance. And what was really important to me was a clinic that had some mix of both some direct client experience and exposure, as well as like a really meaningful writing opportunities. So I was drawn to the RLC for that reason. And I was so grateful that I did. I had a really meaningful experience on my one main case that I've worked on in both my quarters, Burton. Basically, Charles Burton is a death row inmate in Alabama. He's currently in the Holman facility in Atmore, if anyone's familiar with the Alabama prison system. And he is basically suing in order to confirm that he has a right to have a spiritual advisor of his choosing at his side at the moment of his execution. The Alabama prison system in the past not only allowed but required that the prison chaplain, who happens to be mainline Protestant, be present, which was a problem for clients like ours, like Mr. Burton, who are not Protestant. Our client is Muslim, and he would prefer to not only not have the Protestant chaplain there, but to affirmatively have his imam there. And so we're suing to try to get him that right at the time of his execution. The case is interesting because it's a little bit of a high profile case. It follows from two Supreme Court cases that have come down, and not this year, but last year, that were tangentially touching on the same issue. Basically, the Supreme Court decided those cases in the stay posture and didn't really reach the heart of the religious liberty issues and just said these were untimely and kind of begged inmates to bring these claims sooner so that the religious liberty aspect could actually get litigated. And that's what our case is through Mr. Burton. So that was a really exciting opportunity. In our first week of clinic, we didn't write the complaint because this is a more high profile case. We do have co-counsel, but we, communicated and basically co-wrote the complaint within my first week of clinic. And then by the end of the first quarter, we were working on drafting opposition to a motion to dismiss, which we ultimately won. And then over the last year, we have been involved in the discovery process. So that involved, for example, last quarter, the full-time students and me and as an advanced student were basically the front line in vetting experts that we will eventually call, both on, saying that this is religiously like a right that's, is found in mainline religion doctrine, but also a prison security expert from other states to kind of say, hey, look, like this really isn't that big of a burden, and really should the Alabama prison system wouldn't really have a problem accommodating this. So it's just been a really meaningful experience in on-the-ground litigation, basically going through every stage up until the trial. And once the trial does come, which is scheduled for next year, students will have a major role in that as well, the way that I did. And I should also mention that part of this, and I think you'll hear that in a lot of the other stories, is that the clinic, it really emphasizes the importance of face-to-face interaction with the client, and how much kind of hearing those human stories can shape your own advocacy. So me and my partner last year were actually sent to Alabama along with Professor Sani to meet Mr. Burton, which was, I think, probably the most impactful and meaningful experience I have and would have at law school. Obviously there was, it was a very heavy experience, and the clinic was very good at navigating that and kind of giving us all the tools to go in and kind of have a successful meeting and connect with our client, but also kind of really analyze for ourselves and digest for ourselves what that meant to visit a client on death row. So I was really appreciative of that. And I think with that, I'll turn it over to Nicole, who can talk about her experience, which was, I think probably you'll see some similar themes, but also very different. So.
Yeah, thanks, Christy. So I'm Nicole. I'm a 3L, and I also was in RLC in spring of last year with Christy and Rachel, who you'll meet in just a bit. Similar to Christy, I picked a clinic based on what I thought the skills I would be able to develop in each of the clinics. And so for me, that involved asking around of a lot of current and former students about what types of work they do, and essentially just picking the clinic that had the broadest breadth of those types of work. And what I heard about RLC and what I can confirm for you now is, there's such a range of projects to work on depending on your interests and depending on the skills you're looking to gain. And that ranges from kind of standing up in federal court and arguing, which I got to do, to, filing a cert petition, or to doing more kind of local policy advocacy. And so that mix was something I was drawn to. And in addition, had heard such great things about the faculty of this clinic and how they invest in their students. And so that was something that really drew me here. So my primary case that I worked on, Christy mentioned her primary case. We typically have one major case that we work on and two other ones, we can call them minor cases. They're not minor so much as, the clinic might have a smaller role or they might be ramping up at a different stage of litigation. So my major case was working on a suit in federal court on behalf of an inmate in California who was seeking access to his Native American religious practices. And was being denied by prison administrators. So this had a bunch of, 14th Amendment, 1983 claims, as well as working with some of the, religious liberty specific statutes, which was a great broad experience and introduction to a lot of that work. My partner and I got to visit with our client several times, which as Christy mentioned, was like a really powerful experience, and really helpful in contextualizing the work that we do as a clinic and the humans that that work can touch, which I was really grateful for, being able to go to court and know who it is that you're representing and know something about them personally, I thought was really powerful. And getting to work on a case where, this was on behalf of someone who grew up in a completely different faith tradition than my own, and being able to build the skills to navigate kind of across cultures and to be able to tell someone's story in a way that's true to them, but also, has a claim under the law. And so that was kind of the highlight. We got to argue a motion in federal court, as I mentioned, and file several briefs, which was really cool. The other case that I worked on, so I am planning to work in environmental law after I graduate. So I had kind of opted into one of the clinic's long-running projects, which is essentially a land use dispute that's happening in the South Bay with a group of Muslim community members who are seeking to build a mosque and have been kind of going through a really tortuous permit approval process, kind of working with both political obstacles and just kind of the way the process is set up for, at this point, nearly a decade. And so working with that community to advocate for, their ability to build a structure that would allow them to practice their religion, while at the same time realizing, a lot of the permitting systems that we're working in were designed to protect different values. And so for me, as someone who is interested in doing environmental law in the future, those might seem like those interests could be in tension at times. And I saw that in the case. And one thing I was really grateful for was the opportunity to get that perspective of, these are people looking to build build something for their community, facing opposition from other members of the community who, for a variety of reasons, felt like growth was not appropriate in that area. And so I think it adds a lot of dimensions to the work that I'll do in the future, and helping to understand, again, the human context of that work. And so I think I've hit everything I wanted to. I'm going to turn it over to Rachel, who actually was my partner on that project.
Hi everyone, I'm Rachel. I was also in RLC last spring. I'm a 3L now. I was in RLC last spring as a 2L, and then this fall I did advanced clinic. And the main case I worked on was a case called Brown. It was an employment case. We were working on the appeal of our client's a Seventh-day Adventist who applied to be a correctional officer but was denied the position because she cannot work on Saturdays, which are her Sabbath. And so my job, along with my clinic partner Jeff, was to write the opening appellate brief in this case. And I know sometimes people wonder how partners are picked, and kind of how I think it works is Professor Sani Nzeba will give you a little bit of information at the beginning of the quarter about the different cases that they have going on, and they'll ask you if there are any that you're particularly interested in, and they try to take those interests in account when they're assigning cases and trying to make sure that everyone has kind of an even caseload, I think, rather than figuring out who to partner up with who, is at least the impression I've gotten. But anyway, back to this case. It was a really incredible experience and exciting process. To back up a little bit, I was interested in joining RLC because I wanted to do a clinic that gave me some hands-on litigation experience, and had ample legal writing opportunities. I did come in with an interest also in religious liberty, so I was really excited to kind of get the best of both of those worlds. And I did end up having a pretty intensive writing project. We started from the beginning of looking at the entire trial record from this case, talked over what we thought possible strategies were going forward. And then Professor Sani Nzeba gave us a bunch of ownership over what happened next. They said, make an outline, talk about how you want to pursue this case. And they gave us guidance throughout the whole process, but also I was surprised by how much ownership we also had over it, that we wrote this 70-page brief basically by ourselves, but had these learning opportunities along the way where we would meet with Professor Sani Nzeba and talk about both strategy from like a big picture lens, and also by the end going through each sentence, doing like line by line edits. And that was a really credible opportunity because like when else in our law school careers do you get to go over your legal writing in that much detail? And so that was something I was really, really thankful for. And kind of to echo what Nicole and Christy said, meeting our client was really special. It kind of removed, you know, legal writing can feel like kind of an academic or like intellectual exercise, but putting a face to that name and like getting to meet our client, I think made both me and my partner very excited and passionate about what we were doing. And yeah, I couldn't recommend the clinic enough. It was like an incredible experience, and I'm really, really happy I did it.
Great. So I'll pick up from Rachel. My name is Heather. I am a 2L, and I'm currently in the clinic doing RLC virtually. I can say that it's still going very well, and Professor Sunny and Zeba have done an excellent job making us feel connected. But hopefully you won't have to deal with that issue because it's slated for winter and spring of next year. But in the event that you're worried the clinic might have to happen virtually even that late, I wouldn't say that you should worry about it with RLC because it's going great. But I'll start with saying, you know, what it was that drew me to apply to RLC. And like everybody else, I wasn't necessarily looking for a specific subject area. I was looking for a clinic that would give me a wide range of opportunities for skill development, but that was also very like client focused. I really enjoyed my pro bono work that I've done, and so because I'm looking to go into an unrelated sort of litigation oriented field, I wanted a clinic to sort of fill the space of like rounding out my legal education by being client focused, and also at the same time providing me a really good opportunity to develop my writing, and then work in a range of areas. Like the RLC does agency work, does trial level work, does appellate work, as others have mentioned. And with the two different cases that we work on, having the chance to engage in more than one of those areas has been great for me. And I think another aspect that I really enjoyed or was looking forward to in the clinic was sort of cross-cultural lawyering and taking an approach that exposed me to a lot of people whose backgrounds were different from mine. And I think that the people that are in the clinic right now, it's sort of borne out to be true. We have a really diverse group of students. We have someone who's in a JD MBA program, sort of probably the antithesis of what you think when you think of like First Amendment, people who are very gung-ho about that. And so I think knowing that the clinic will draw a wide range of students was something that was also interesting for me. So I'll then talk about the matters that I've worked on this quarter. The first is a case involving a religious accommodation under Title VII, and we're working on a petition for certiorari at the Supreme Court. So in this case, the client is a Jehovah's Witness who works for a utilities company in Memphis. And he had worked for the company for quite some time, I think almost 20 years, before he became disabled and was forced to take a different position with the company. And during the process of getting himself reassigned, he was forced into a position that no longer accommodated his religious observances, which include some weeknight and weekend observances and sort of community work, which is a big part of his role as an elder within his Jehovah's Witness faith community. And so he ran into a bunch of issues with schedule and overtime, requiring him to be at work when he was supposed to be with his congregation. And the company, which had for a long time accommodated his request, suddenly failed to accommodate him. And he filed suit under Title VII, alleging failure to accommodate. And just for some background, the text of Title VII in this area requires employers to accommodate unless they would suffer an undue hardship in doing so. And there's a Supreme Court case from the 70s which interpreted that undue hardship language as anything that would impose more than a de minimis cost on the employer. And so naturally that has really lowered the burden that employers will have to show in order to excuse themselves from having to accommodate an employer. And even at the time, there was a lot of sort of uproar about whether this interpretation was faithful to the text of Title VII. Justice Marshall wrote a vigorous dissent in which he was joined by, I believe, Justice Brennan. And there's been, even in the past recent years, sort of a renewed attention on revisiting that case and whether or not this interpretation of undue hardship should be overruled. But the justices that have indicated their support for doing this have noted that the cases before them didn't present a good opportunity to review the case. So we think that our case, Small is the name of our client. We think Small is the right vehicle. And so we are working with an appellate team at Wilson Sonsini and Professor McConnell in his capacity as senior counsel at Wilson Sonsini to write the cert petition. And we, so what's that has looked like for my partner and I has been researching specific areas of what we want to argue in the petition and drafting lengthy memos that we submitted to our co-counsel, just sort of brief them on the issues. And then we have drafted parts of the petition in coordination with the team at Wilson Sonsini and are currently in the process of revising and editing the petition that we hope to file before we end clinic, which will be really exciting for us. And as the others mentioned, this has been an amazing opportunity for me to really develop my writing. I've never had a professor sit down with me and just give me line edits on the stuff that I've been doing, and that was something Professor Sani did with us, like in the second week of clinic, and has continued to be really, we've had a lot of attention on our writing as a result of this project, which I've been really grateful for. And unfortunately, being in virtual clinic, haven't had the opportunity to sort of visit our client the way that we might have had it not been virtual. But we mentioned, my partner and I, an interest in communicating with our client, and immediately Professor Sani set up a call. I was really grateful, and we spoke with him just last week, actually. And hi, Hannah, we are doing a recording of our RLC info session. Hannah's in the clinic with us right now. We often use these lines to jump on calls with our partners. So, virtual clinic at work. Anyway, as I mentioned, we got to speak with our client, and it was really amazing for us, even though, you know, we're at sort of a late stage in the case where we're writing a cert petition. You might think that we're sort of removed from the facts of the case and advocating specifically for the client, because here we're focused on sort of the statutory interpretation question, but that's not the case at all. We really enjoyed chatting with him. It brought so much more meaning to the case than it would have been otherwise, and found out some new things about the case that really just sort of pulled at your heartstrings and remind you why it is that you're doing the work that you're doing. So I really enjoyed that. And then I'll just touch briefly on the second matter that I'm working on. It's sort of on the opposite end of things. It's more of an advocacy project where we're working with a Jewish nonprofit organization that advocates for Jewish inmates in prison, Jewish individuals in the military. They've been a longtime friend of the clinic since we were founded. And so we're working with them. They brought our attention to some policies that the states of Connecticut and North Carolina have about how inmates can observe their religions in prison, that end up just having a hugely disparate impact on the Jewish inmates. One policy requires that the inmates have a faith leader of the same religion before they can have supervised religious observances, which, if you know Orthodox Jewish Sabbath rules, makes it difficult since they can't, any sort of chaplain couldn't travel to the prison during that time. And then also there's in North Carolina a rule that there must be at least 6 inmates who wish to observe a religious practice before the prison will offer them a supervisor, and there just aren't that many inmates in North Carolina prisons. So the practical implication is that the Jewish inmates have to observe their practices on their own in their own cells. There's also some kosher related issues that they've brought our attention to. So with that case, there's a number of different ways that we could go about trying to resolve those issues, whether it's litigation or negotiation with the prisons, or leveraging other actors like the Department of Justice, who investigated prisons in Virginia recently, with some big success there. And so my partner and I just researched the case law on these issues, sort of figured out what was the landscape, and then had calls with our partner organization to discuss with them what we thought the best options were, and recently started reaching out to some prisoners in North Carolina to get more information so that we can either draft demand letters to the prison or try to get in touch with the DOJ to see if we can help in this area. So I will just say, like Rachel, I can't say enough good things about the clinic. I'm really enjoying it and definitely hoping to do some advanced clinic work in the fall or later on. And so I think that's the best endorsement that I can give, would be that I want to keep doing it. So.
Great. Okay, so thanks everybody. I thought we'd finish out just by giving some brief advice for applying, if you have any. So not everybody has to go, but yeah, that's how we ended our actual panel. So thought we'd try to recreate that as well, since that could obviously be useful to everybody. For myself, I'll just say that I would just be, I think Professor Sani probably mentioned this a little bit in his video, but as was seen by all of our stories, the Religious Liberty Clinic is really looking for a really diverse group of students and has had that in the past and wants to have that in the future. So I definitely wouldn't be afraid to just be really honest about what your interests are and kind of where you're kind of approaching religious liberty from. And because, that's all Professor Sani and Zeba are really looking for, is just like an engagement with what the clinic is and just a knowledge of like how they approach litigation and what they do. So an example from my background is as I said, I hadn't thought about religious liberty at all, but actually the only kind of time I had in the past was because I'm interested in health law. And so I had thought a lot about the vaccine issue. And obviously from that perspective, religious liberty was often an impediment to herd immunity and a lot of pro-vaccine stances. So that had been my prior experience with religious liberty, and also is just, I guess, generally maybe indicative, you could probably guess, of like my political leanings. And I was just really upfront about, I was interested, this was what my background was in it, but that these were the reasons I wanted to do the clinic, just kind of looking into realizing that the cases were, really on the whole, not controversial. Professor Sani and Zeba pick cases that kind of everybody can get behind. And then through those vehicles really teach, as Nicole said, how to tell human stories, and as Heather said, at every stage of litigation. So yeah, just laying that out there, I think made for a successful application, just because it shows understanding of what the clinic is, and it does add to the clinic's diversity, which is what they're looking for. So
yeah, and underscoring what Christy has said, certainly it's okay if what you think you're bringing to the clinic and how you're approaching religious liberty is, I haven't really heard much about it or thought much about it, but I'm curious, and that's something that it's totally okay to say on an application, just so long as you're telling a story of kind of what interests you and kind of what made you curious about this. And so much of this clinic is really built on your interactions with the faculty, but also with other clinic students. So I don't think we mentioned before, but there will be periodic kind of seminars led by students about different religious liberty topics, things that are timely, things that are on your mind, where a really open discussion is encouraged. And so that's why it is important to have kind of people with all perspectives coming to that, so that we can get the best discussion.
And I'll just say one more thing about sort of your background coming into the clinic. I haven't even taken First Amendment. And the first 2 weeks of clinic are sort of boot camp, where you do a lot of, we have seminars, we have readings ahead of them that give us sort of the backgrounds. You read, as Nicole mentioned earlier, like the specific religious liberty statutes that we work with. You read a lot of scholarship just explaining religious liberty, going back to sort of like the foundational sort of American idea of religious liberty, all the way through what recent scholarship is saying. So if you're at all interested, the scholar Douglas Laycock is one that Professor Sani sort of relies on and included in his readings for the class. So if you're interested before you apply, that's sort of one of the things that you might do to give yourself an understanding of if this is a clinic that you would really enjoy. But I think we all have enjoyed it a lot. So.
With that, I think we'll end. I think I'm unmuted, right? All right. Yeah, with that, we'll end. And as I said at the beginning, all of us, I think, said our names. If not Nicole Collins, Rachel Beta, Heather Edges, Christy Corn, please feel free to email us if you have any questions, we're all obviously very happy to talk about our experiences in the RLC, and happy to be really candid, which we were. I feel like we were in the question and answer session, but obviously happy to do offline as well. So thanks so much if you actually listen to all of this, and good luck with your application process.